Hi, and welcome to the first video installment of Leaning Tree Gardens. Whenever you're working on your garden, it's really important that you make sure that you keep an eye on the calendar. You gotta know when it's time to get in the right mindset. Sometimes you might want to get started a little too early, but you also don't want to start too late. So often people will think, well, the first day of spring is a good time to start your gardening. But here in Northeast Wisconsin, you can't really trust the first day of spring. First day of spring was March 20th. Fortunately, it's no longer March. It is now, as we can tell from the calendar, past halfway through April. It is April 16th, and it seems to be a perfect time to put on the right attitude, get everything ready, and get out and get started with the first step of gardening, which is to check your garden, check your tools, check your soil, and maybe even get your hands dirty and get down in the soil. So let's head out back and see what we can do. So getting started in the garden often means getting out and getting the right boots on or shoes on. And garden shoes are helpful, but this time of year the weather can be a little bit unpredictable. So we're going to put on some nice sturdy boots, and if they're a little too heavy and clunky, that's okay. Now, it's nice to have a hat that protects you from the sun, but as you'll see in a few minutes, we need a different kind of hat. We're going to go with one, that's perhaps a little bit warmer, as will be obvious in just a few minutes. And although a nice t-shirt could be great for starting your garden in the southern climes, up here in Northeast Wisconsin, we're going to go with a coat. So we got the right clothes on, we got the right attire, and now we're going to head out back and put these clothes to some good use. Let's go. Okay, now that we're outside and ready to go, it's important to make sure you have the proper eye gear, because we don't want to be blinded by the sun. Those sun rays, the UV rays, can really do damage to your retina. And sometimes it can get a little bright. But before we go out to the garden, we got to make sure we have the right tools. So we're going to head on out to the garden shed. And as you'll see right away, sometimes with gardening, we run into some problems, and we'll just address these problems the best we can. And sometimes the first problem is, getting your tools. April 16th. We're going to have to improvise. So as we can see, Mother Nature doesn't always make things easy for us. So instead of the typical hand trowel and three-pronged hoe that we would love to be using right now, and maybe if we're more of an industrialist, we would be whipping out the tiller, we're going to have to go with the good old handy-dandy snow shovel. Now, before we put on the snow shovel, we got to make sure we have our gardening gloves. Gardening gloves are really helpful in the winter in Northeast Wisconsin. We don't want to get any unsightly thorns in our fingers. We also don't want to lose our fingers because of frostbite. So we're going to put on our gardening gloves, grab our handy-dandy garden snow shovel, and head out and take a look at our garden and maybe even test some soil. Let's go. All right, now that we've got our handy-dandy garden shovel and we're heading out to the garden, we're going to run into another problem. It could be the 24 inches of snow that fell yesterday. So the question is it worth it? Let's give it a try. All right, halfway there. I could really use Nathan's snowmobile right about now. All right, well, here we are at the garden. As you can see, it looks just about ready for some wonderful early plantings, maybe some spring greens, and we can put in some of those long developing plants. But first, I think I heard somebody say we should test the soil. Well, let's see if we can do that. Okay, as you can see, we're inside the garden now, And I'm going to try to get a nice clean sample. And we'll dig down a little bit. And we'll send this off to the lab. See if perhaps it's a little too heavy and salty material, or maybe it's a little too alkaline, and we're going to have to put some who knows what into it. Got to test the soil or your plants won't grow. But in Northeast Wisconsin, you know, we do whatever it takes, right? I'm really glad I started this gigantic garden this year. One other thing that the Northeast Wisconsin gardener has to really think about is whether or not you're prepared to look like a total nut job. My wife just hung her head out the window of her studio and asked me, "What the boop are you doing?" Standing in my snow garden in the middle of April with my snow shovel. Well, I'm a dedicated gardener and I do what it takes. So now that I've got my snow soil sample and I've got my tool, the one that I can get out of the snow, it's time for me to reorganize my plan. So, as you could probably guess, my master gardener chose not to come out for any kind of interview in my garden here in the middle of April. And so that video is going to have to come a little later. But improvise, improvise, improvise. Well, we're back inside now, considering that my feet were getting quite cold. And I did a little bit of research on the computer and found that there actually are a couple of crops that will grow in Northeast Wisconsin in the middle of April when you get a snowstorm with 2 feet of snow. The first is quite easy to plant and harvest, and it's a very common crop that can be sold quite easily all across the United States. It's called ice. You could take glasses of water and take them out to your garden and set them in the middle of your 2 feet of snow, and the next thing you know, you'll have big giant ice cubes. If you decide to flavor them, you can sell them as slushies, or giant flavored ice cubes, or colorful things that you hang from trees and the birds bump into and they glisten around in the sun. Ice is a very marketable product that can be sold all across Northeast Wisconsin, no matter what time of year, especially when people are really, really, really thirsty from shoveling all that snow. The other crop that apparently grows very well in Northeast Wisconsin, according to the UPS, is wildflowers, because today they delivered my bag of burpee wildflower seed, which apparently I'm supposed to just sprinkle on top of the snow and hope they settle down to the bottom. But if they don't, that's okay. Just like the ice crop, the wildflower crop, and almost everything else, the good thing about a snowstorm in the middle of April is that it's not my fault. Nothing grows, not my fault. If I don't get any food for my family, not my fault. I can just blame the weather and the 2 feet of snow. Now, before we sign out for this episode, I want to point out that if you are at all interested, I have a vast amount, a whole yard full, and part of a driveway still full of snow that you can get for free. All you have to do is come pick it up. Bring your snowmobile, a plow, a truck, load it up in the back of your vehicle and take it home. And you can plant it right in your garden. You can spread it around, you can mulch it, you can do all kinds of things with it. As I pointed out, you can harvest your own ice and then sell it. There's a big market for ice up here. So, until next time, this is Gardening at the Leading Tree Garden in the middle of April after 2 feet of snow.